Hello everyone, No One Consequence here with episode 8 of my high-level Dungeons & Dragons campaign playthrough. Here is the player character roster. There are 7 characters being run by 5 different players. And here is the roster of both human and animal NPCs associated with the party. Where we left off last time, the characters had arrived at a 4-way intersection. However, the hallway leading west was dark, and there were even mushrooms growing out of it and spilling into the main corridor. So the characters decided to go east. The eastern hallway had several card-operated doors, which of course Garrett's gray card opened. However, the room behind every door appeared to be a small private living quarters, stripped of anything of value. In this scene, Gorbadoc is inspecting a skeleton still lying on a bed. The character soon arrived at another 4-way intersection. To the south, they could see a small pool of water on the floor, formed from a leaking pipe overhead. So they decided to check it out, with Gorbadoc leading the way. And while his attention was focused on the pool of water, an electric blue spider dropped from the overhead shadows and directly onto Gorbadoc's head. Of course, the challenge then became one of trying to defeat the spider, while at the same time not bashing Gorb's head in or cutting it off entirely. Fortunately, the spider was not very tough, and halflings are highly resistant to poison. Once the spider was defeated, Aramis boosted Gorbadoc up so that he could search through the webbed lair among the ceiling pipes. The only thing of interest he found was a jet black key card. The characters still do not know the actual hierarchy of these cards, only that they can be used to open certain doors. The characters continued heading east and soon came to a turn in the corridor. And in the distance up ahead, they spotted a den of displacer beasts. Unfortunately, sounds in an all-metal corridor carry a long way when you're wearing plate armor and hard-soled boots. Thus, the displacer beasts were already aware of the character's approach as soon as they turned the corner. The displacer beasts have been living here for years, so they were very familiar with the ship's layout. 3 of them advanced directly on the characters, while 2 headed down a side corridor leading west. Their plan was to come up behind the characters so that the pack could attack from 2 directions at once. And here the characters are advancing to meet the monsters. They wanted to fight in the wide corridor so that more of them could attack at the same time. Only now did the characters become aware of the 2 displacer beasts approaching from behind. However, Thorol had enough time to fire off a magic missile spell at one of them. 2 of the displacer beasts in the wide corridor were defeated, and the third one tried to flee. However, it was finished off with missile fire. This allowed everyone to turn and face the remaining monster, which had circled around. Now the characters entered the chamber where the displacer beast den was located. In the center of the room was another chute leading down to the lower levels of the ship. Niobe inspected a door on the eastern wall, but it required a card to open. Meanwhile, Gorbadoc began digging through the trash comprising the displacer beast's nest. This time he found a brown-colored key card. Niobe inspected a second door in the east wall, but it too required a card to open. Gorbadoc tried using the brown card he had just found on the door, but it was not high enough access level. Notice that the door requires at least a yellow card to operate, so the door did not return the key card to Gorb. Next, Garrett was asked to try the gray card he was carrying. The room beyond looked like a medical facility for performing surgery, although the characters wouldn't really understand that, and it was staffed by a fully functioning android. And here is the illustration for this room, which is provided with the module. Unfortunately, although the android is still fully functional, its programming has become corrupted. And the moment it spotted someone at the door, the android concluded that that person is in need of emergency surgery. Therefore, it rushed to the door with unnatural speed, grabbed up Garrett with its unnatural strength and slammed him down onto the operating table. Within a matter of moments, and before anyone could really react, the android already had Garrett anesthetized. The characters nearest the door rushed inside. Varys tried to stop the android, while Niobe tried to get Garrett off the operating table. However, the android was able to fend them both off, and it began using the nearby bank of surgical tools to operate on Garrett. Although because the android was malfunctioning, it wasn't really surgery. It was more like butchery. Varys continued to attack the android, and now Niobe switched her attention to it as well. Unfortunately, she immediately rolled a fumble and hit herself instead of the android. But luckily, Aramis and Obrak had finally arrived, and they too began attacking the android. Eventually, the characters inflicted enough damage on the android that it finally shut down. Niobe then cast healing spells on Garrett to prevent him from dying on the operating table. The characters had to wait for Garrett to recover from the anesthesia before they could move on. They spent some time thoroughly searching this room, but they found nothing of any use. Next, the characters moved to the nearby keycard door. Only this time, Garrett gave Obrak his gray card so that he could open it. Everyone figured Obrak would be better able to fight off another malfunctioning android than could Garrett. The door opened to reveal another medical treatment room, as well as another android. Here is the illustration from the adventure module. Only this android did not immediately attack. Instead, it asked in a very pleasant voice if anyone was injured or sick, and if so, please come inside. Garrett was still not fully healed from the surgery android attack, so they called him forward. Most of the characters entered the room and spread out, just in case they suddenly needed space to maneuver. The android asked Garrett to sit on the examination table, and then it looked over his wounds. The android then took out a handheld push-button spray container and used it on Garrett's wounds. The injuries healed almost immediately, and Garrett regained the hit points he was still down by. And if you're enjoying the story so far, please remember to hit the like button. With Garrett now fully healed, the characters decided to return to the spot where they had first spotted the displacer beast. They had noticed a door there, which required no key card to open. It was push-button operated. Of course, they were too busy at the time to check it out. The door opened into a huge empty room with several skeletons scattered around on the floor. It was difficult to tell what this space was originally used for, because any furnishings which might have been present were now gone. The skeletons were also examined, but nothing useful was found on any of them. There were a couple of additional rooms north of the large room, also accessed by push-button doors. They appeared to be living and storage spaces. But again, anything of value had been taken long ago. The characters finally exited the area and entered a narrow hallway to the west. They then began heading south again. That hallway eventually led the characters to another wide corridor. Off to the east, they could see the open space with the access chute and the displacer beast den. The characters then gathered up to discuss which way they should explore next. Gorbadoc even suggested checking out the access chute. However, none of the other characters were ready for that yet. There was still too much unexplored area on this level, and they didn't want anything dangerous coming down behind them. Alright, well that's all for now. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button. If you can, leave a comment, let me know what you think. If you have not yet, please consider subscribing, and anything you do to help support the channel, I appreciate it. Thanks again. Bye for now.